Welcome back. So I wanted to sit down and talk about Destiny 2's beta, which is now wrapped up, and I just wanted to give some of my impressions about the beta itself. I'm not going to go into PvE because I feel like a lot of people have already done that, and Bungie has listened to what the community has said, and I think there's going to be a lot of changes come September when the game is actually released. And we should see that a lot of the problems that we saw with the game itself in regards to the PvE should be fixed or changed so that it'll create a much more fluid experience and we won't see a lot of those issues. I did enjoy the actual starting missions. I did enjoy the strike itself. I wish we could see more. Would have been a bit more fun to play another strike or maybe do the patrols around Nessus, but unfortunately for us we got what we got, so we'll have to see what happens. Maybe with the August release of the PC version we may see some changes and maybe see some expansion of the game itself, so I'm looking forward to that. But from the perspective of Destiny 2's PvP, I want to talk about this more in depth, specifically some of the issues that I saw in regards to the beta. Now of course these could be resolved as the full game comes out, but my concerns are from the day one of hearing a lot of the things that Bungie are talking about, that I'm worried that a lot of stuff regarding PvP has been band-aided and not really fixed. Now, we all know of the excessive issues that happen with Destiny 1's PvP, where connections, lag, a lot of issues we're seeing because of the peer-to-peer environment. Also, people could exploit that and use that to give themselves an advantage over a lot of other people, and none of that has really been fixed to any great degree within Destiny 1. Now I was hoping that Bungie would take the time to actually look at trying to resolve a lot of these issues coming into Destiny 2, but the problem is I'm seeing some of these issues still crop up in Destiny 2, and it's concerning me that, you know, there's these red flags that went off when they talked about reducing from 6 players to 4 players per side, and the fact that they was going to use peer-to-peer. But then they spoke about some hybrid cloud, whatchamado-it peer-to-peer server environment that PvP was going to use. But we still know so little about this. And I think this is where Bungie needs to add some clarity and let people know exactly how this system works. Sure, they don't have to go in depth and talk about the UDP and TCPs and this is how this works, but they do need to clear it up and explain to us how this is going to work, because one of the most frustrating things from the perspective of players is going into a game and then having this lag or people just bouncing around all over the place, causing you no end of frustrations. And that's what I've seen in Destiny 1, and I've played a lot of PvP, so I know and see it on a regular basis. And if this starts to happen, we'll see the repeat of the same issues that we've seen in Destiny 1, especially 6 to 9 months down the track when the player base starts to drop off, as they start to wander off to other games, as the PvE experience starts to fade out for them. They will probably play PvP either a lot more or a lot less. So the population will fluctuate depending on what's going on within the game itself. And I'm just worried that we'll see this amplification of these problems again like we've had with Destiny 1. As we all know, Destiny's netcode hasn't been the greatest of greatest netcodes out there. So there is still a lot of those issues that we've seen from Destiny 1 cropping up in the beta itself. And some of the things that I definitely did see happen was in the regards to where I'd be behind cover or go around a corner and basically be shot, or even popping a shield from my Titan and getting shot through the shield because the person was lagging, or that from their perspective I'd never even put up my shield. And this can be an extremely frustrating thing. There's also the cases where basically the super would kill you from a million miles away, which happens in Destiny 1. And can be very, very frustrating from that perspective. Also noticed that the in-air accuracy was definitely a lot different within this. Now I don't know whether that's because the auto-aim stickiness wasn't there, or because of the way the mods and that are going to change within Destiny 2. We've seen definitely a reduction in in-air accuracy. But probably the two things that really stood out to me was problems, and this is something that has definitely been a problem within Destiny. One was the spawn system itself is definitely still very, very bad. There's many cases where I would spawn directly into the line of sight of enemies and they'd basically gun me down before I could even move very far off the point where I'd spawn. Or I actually watched it as enemy players spawn directly in front of me and in my line of sight. Now this is something from a first-person shooter game that should never ever happen. You should always be able to spawn in safely and be able to at least get off the mark before being gunned down and shot. And unfortunately, from my perspective, it's just not something that has really been fixed in the actual beta itself and really needs to be addressed. Maybe they create some sort of safe zone where you can spawn. Now, I think a lot of it also tied in the fact that the map they gave us for the control was an extremely small map. And this is something that Bungie needs to, I think, address in the sense that sometimes they make their maps far too small. Now they've probably done that because the movement system has changed and things are not as fast as they used to be, but there was just times that it was just absolutely ridiculous. The other thing that I definitely saw was the trading was inordinate amount of times that I would engage in a gun battle with somebody and basically trade with them. Now this came down to, I think the flinch was an extremely amount of heaviness put into it, and a lot of at times in a lot of the end of the beta I was aiming at people's middle belly button to basically shoot because I knew that the flinch was going to flick me off either vertically or horizontally, so I had to try and counter that very much. Now I hope that they reduce that coming into the game itself, but it was just a horrible amount of flinch in the game. Now again, this is something that can be adjusted as the full game comes out, but these are things that need to be addressed and need to be changed. So one thing that I definitely did notice from the perspective of the gunplay or the guns themselves is it felt very random at times about how they felt or the time to kill. There would be situations where you would take on a person and you basically would kill them within seconds. There might be another situation where you take on somebody else and it requires an entire magazine to kill them. Now this makes it very frustrating from the perspective of not knowing what the time to kill is when you're taking on opponents. And now with a lot of the changes within the Destiny 2 PvP, meaning that a lot of times when you take on an opponent, you may be, or your shields will be taken down to a point where you have to back off for a few seconds before you can re-engage. And this can leave these situations where they can be reinforced with more players, or there's this uncertainty of getting back into that battle because you've had to disengage for so long to recover your health. Now I know that they're looking at adjusting, or hopefully adjusting, the way that health regen works, even though there's not much difference between Destiny and Destiny 2. I think it's something that probably needs to definitely be looked at, because having to be out of that battle for as long as we are before our health regenerates can be a rather frustrating thing, because it makes it very difficult from that perspective. Taking on 2 to 3 players, which is possible in Destiny 1 at this point in time, is near impossible in Destiny 2, because you don't know when or how much the time to kill is going to be on the first person, and by that point you're going to get team shotted by the other 2 people before, if you manage to kill them. I have had a few situations where I've managed to take on 2 to 3 people, but it's either through sheer luck that they've been a bad shot, or somehow I've managed to maneuver myself into a situation where I have better cover or a better advantage. But that's not going to work coming into Destiny 2. And we see this shift from Bungie in the perspective of how they want to move away from players being very much lone wolves and being more team orientated. If you have a look at the game modes that they've released recently, they have the countdown game mode, which is very team orientated, and now we have the release from IGN of the survival game mode, which is again, it's a very team orientated game mode. And this is going to cause a lot of problems for solo players in the sense that they won't be able to go out and lone wolf things anymore, because they are trying to get people to interact as such. But if you can't find other people to be able to play that game with, it's going to become very frustrating. And the problem is at this point in time is there's still a lot of players out there that are solo and go into these games and are not going to get the enjoyment that they have out of it previously, because unless you're with a team, you're basically going to get overrun a great deal of the time. Now, I sound overly critical about a lot of the changes that Destiny 2 PvP has got incoming, but I think that from my perspective, I want to give across these views to Bungie so that they can take a look at them and see ways that they can make adjustments to hopefully make things better overall. And I know from the perspective of Bungie, they're listening to the community and want this feedback so that they can make those changes and make the game even better. Because we want to see it improve, we want to see it get better, we want to see it be something incredible. And without the feedback, they're not going to be able to do that. But in the same respect, they need to give us some feedback and say, look, this is possible, this is not possible, this is something you'll have to persist with. This is something we can't fix in the current environment. And this is something that's still worrying me with the sandboxes potentially being in the same arena. We're having the PvE and PvP sandboxes together. How much are they going to affect each other as changes are made as the game progresses? Now, hopefully they can not affect things too much, but I think Bungie needs to look at some kind of separation in the future. But I guess at this point in time, we're going to have to deal with the game as it is in its current state. I mean, I would have loved to have seen 60 frames a second for all their environments, console and PC, but we're not going to see that at this point in time. The other challenge that Bungie's going to have is coming into the PC beta is the PC crowd is somebody that are very, very fussy about what their games are like, and if they don't see what they like, they'll make it very vocal that the game is not something they're going to play in the future. So Bungie has got some real challenges ahead and need to be open up, or at least be open with us and say to us, you know, this is what the game is going to be like in its current environment. You know, there may be changes in the future, but if they're not, if they try to keep this veil of secrecy like they have in the past, I think that can cause them a lot of issues coming into the future. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. If you got to play the beta, leave me some comments below. Anyway, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video, and I will talk to you in the next one. Thanks, bye.